If you've ever watched a video about Costco before, you already think you know the secret. Somebody, somewhere, told you that Costco doesn't actually make money selling you anything. They told you the hot dog is a loss leader, the rotisserie chicken is a loss leader, the whole store is basically a museum of things sold near cost, and the entire company survives on one thing and one thing only: the $65 card in your wallet. It's a great story. It's clean, it's simple, it fits in a 15-second clip, and it has been repeated so many times that it now sounds like common knowledge. Here's the problem. It's not true. Not even close. In the most recent fiscal year, Costco brought in over $5 billion from membership fees. That sounds enormous, until you put it next to the other number sitting right beside it in the same filing: $30 billion in gross margin dollars, generated from selling actual products. Membership fees aren't bigger than merchandise profit. They're not even in the same universe. So if the famous story is wrong, if the card in your wallet isn't secretly funding the whole operation, then what is actually going on inside this company? Because something is going on. Costco is one of the most efficient, most dominant, most quietly ruthless businesses on the planet. And the real explanation is stranger, smarter, and far more interesting than the myth everyone keeps repeating. Let's start by taking that myth apart properly, because understanding why it's wrong is the fastest way into what's actually true. Membership income last year sat at roughly 1.9% of Costco's total revenue. 1.9%. If you deleted every membership fee tomorrow, Costco would still be selling you groceries, electronics, tires, and gasoline, and that merchandise business alone generates $30 billion in gross margin. So the fee is real money, and it matters enormously, but it is not the profit engine people think it is. What Costco's own official filings actually say is far more interesting than the myth. In its most recent annual report, the company states plainly that the membership format is integral to its business and profitability, and that growth in the membership base, in what's called executive tier penetration, and in renewal rates, materially influences how profitable the company becomes. Notice the language. Not membership fees are our profit. Integral to profitability. Influences profitability. That is a company telling you, in its own careful legal language, that the fee is a mechanism, not a piggy bank. And once you understand what that mechanism actually does, the entire business starts to make sense in a completely different way. Here's the mechanism, and it is honestly one of the strangest decisions any major retailer has ever made on purpose. Most retail businesses live and die by one number: gross margin. The industry-wide benchmark for general retail sits somewhere around 25%, meaning for every $100 of products sold, the retailer keeps about 25 after the cost of goods. Costco caps its own gross margin at roughly 12%, on purpose, every single year. This is not a company failing to charge enough. This is a company that has deliberately decided, as a matter of core strategy, never to make more than about 12 cents on the dollar from the stuff on its shelves, no matter how badly it could probably get away with charging more. Why would any business willingly leave that much money on the table? Because the membership fee is what makes leaving it there survivable. The $5 billion a year in membership income is the subsidy that allows Costco to hold that 12% ceiling without bleeding out. The fee isn't the profit. The fee is the permission slip that lets Costco refuse to take the profit everyone else takes. And that single refusal is the first domino in a chain reaction that explains almost everything else about how this company works. Because here's what happens once you cap your own margin that aggressively. Your prices become genuinely, structurally lower than almost anyone else's. And when your prices are genuinely lower, something happens that most retailers only dream about. People don't just shop with you, they buy in bulk, they buy often, and they buy predictably. Low margin, in other words, doesn't just mean less profit per item, it means an explosion in volume. And Craig Jelinek, the man who ran Costco for years, put this as plainly as it's ever been put by any retail executive anywhere. He said, and I'm quoting him directly, "One of the things about low prices, you generate a lot of volume. When you generate a lot of volume, you generate cash." Read that sentence again, because it is the entire philosophy of this company, compressed into 17 words. Low prices aren't a sacrifice Costco makes to be nice. Low prices are a machine for generating volume, and volume, once you understand how Costco actually operates, turns out to be a machine for generating something even more valuable than margin. It generates cash. Actual physical cash sitting in the bank faster than almost any other retailer on earth can generate it. So let's follow that thread, because this is where the story stops being about pricing and starts being about something almost nobody talks about: the products themselves. Walk into a typical American supermarket, and you will find something like 30 to 60,000 different individual items on the shelves. A full Walmart supercenter can carry well over 100,000. Target runs around 80,000. Now here's Costco's number: roughly 4,000 active items in the entire warehouse at any given time. 4,000. That's not a rounding error compared to its competitors. It's a 95% smaller catalog, in stores that are often physically bigger than the competition's. Jim Sinegal, Costco's co-founder, once explained exactly why this matters with a simple observation about a single supermarket aisle. He said if you go into a typical supermarket, you'd find about 350 different SKUs in one aisle alone. Different sizes, different brands, endless variations of essentially the same product. Costco looks at that entire aisle and, in most categories, stocks one, maybe two. One national brand, and Kirkland Signature standing right next to it. That's it. No 12 versions of the same shampoo. No wall of nearly identical cereal boxes. One good option, occasionally two, and nothing else. This sounds like it should be a weakness. Fewer choices, fewer sales, right? It's actually the opposite, and understanding why is the key to the entire company. When you only carry 4,000 items instead of 100,000, something remarkable happens to your relationship with the companies that make those products. Every single item on a Costco shelf has to justify its place there, because the alternative isn't, "We'll also carry your competitor's product on the shelf below." The alternative is simply not being in the store at all. That gives Costco a kind of negotiating leverage that a 100,000 SKU retailer can never have. When Kimberly-Clark and Costco were negotiating diaper pricing at one point, Costco had genuine walk-away power, because it wasn't choosing between 40 diaper brands, it was choosing between essentially one national brand and its own Kirkland Signature line. For years that meant Huggies and Kirkland were the only two diaper options in the entire store. Think about what that means from the supplier's side of the table. If you are a major consumer brand and Costco calls you, they are not asking whether you'd like a little shelf space among your competitors. They are telling you that you can have this entire category exclusively at their price, or you can have nothing. That is an extraordinary amount of leverage, and it comes entirely from the discipline of saying no to almost everything. And Kirkland Signature itself isn't really a budget house brand the way people assume. It's a weapon Costco built specifically to use in that negotiation. Kirkland now accounts for nearly 30% of all units sold across the entire store. Not a side project, a third of everything that leaves the building. It holds close to a quarter of the entire paper goods category by dollar share. It's a meaningful chunk of beverages and snack foods too. Every time a national brand gets too comfortable, too expensive, or too slow to negotiate, Costco has a built-in replacement sitting right there, already trusted by members, already selling in enormous volume. Kirkland doesn't just compete with the national brands on Costco's shelves, it disciplines them. It's the reason Costco never has to beg a supplier for a better price. It can simply remind them that Kirkland is right there, ready to take the entire category if the number doesn't work. Now here's where the story gets genuinely strange, and it's the part almost no other explainer talks about, because it isn't about pricing or products at all. It's about time. Specifically, the gap between two dates. The day Costco sells you something, and the day Costco actually has to pay for it. Because it carries so few items and moves them in such enormous volume, Costco turns over its entire inventory in roughly 30 days. 30 days from the moment a pallet arrives to the moment it's sold. But Costco's payment terms with its suppliers typically run around 40 days. Sit with that gap for a second. Costco is selling the product, collecting the cash from you, and depositing that money in the bank, before it has even paid the company that made the product in the first place. It is, quite literally, selling merchandise before the bill for that merchandise comes due. In finance, this is called negative working capital, and it is one of the single most powerful, most underappreciated advantages a retail business can possibly have. Most companies have to borrow money or tie up their own cash just to keep enough inventory on the shelves while they wait for it to sell. Costco doesn't. Its own suppliers are, in effect, financing its operations for 10 free days at a time, over and over, on an endless loop, across a business doing hundreds of billions of dollars a year. Nobody planned this as a favor to Costco. It's simply the mathematical result of moving 4,000 items with extraordinary speed, but the effect is that Costco extracts free, floating capital directly from its own supply chain, month after month, without anyone at the company having to ask for it. So now we have low margins driving huge volume, a tiny SKU count creating supplier leverage, and blistering inventory speed creating free cash. Where does all of that cash actually go? This is where Costco makes a decision that looks, on paper, like it should be destroying the whole model, and instead turns out to be reinforcing it. Costco pays its workers extraordinarily well. The cash hourly wage alone is around $30 to $32 an hour, and total comp approaches $46 an hour. Compare that to the wider industry. Target's starting wage sits around $15. Walmart's starting wage is around $14, with the average Walmart associate earning somewhere near $18.50 an hour. Read that comparison again, slowly. The average Walmart employee, someone who has been there for years, earns less than the newest, least experienced person just starting on the floor at Costco. In an industry famous for treating labor as the first cost to cut, Costco does the opposite, on purpose, at scale, every single year. And this is where most business explainers stop. Because on the surface, this looks like Costco simply choosing to be generous at the expense of its own margins. But look at what that generosity actually buys. The average retail employee turnover rate across the industry sits above 50% a year, meaning the typical retail company is replacing more than half its workforce annually, over and over, forever, and eating the enormous hidden cost of constantly hiring and training new people. Costco's turnover rate sits under 9%. Under 9%, in an industry where 50 is normal, that is not a minor efficiency gain. That is an entirely different cost structure, hiding behind a wage bill that looks, at first glance, like it should be a weakness. Because it turns out that losing an experienced employee costs a company anywhere from half to twice that person's annual salary, once you count recruiting, training, lost productivity, and mistakes made by someone new. Costco essentially opted out of that cost almost entirely, and it did it by spending more upfront on the same employees year after year instead of constantly replacing them. The result shows up in a number that should genuinely surprise you. The average Costco employee in the United States generates somewhere north of $850,000 in annual revenue for the company. The industry average for warehouse clubs and supercenters sits closer to $350,000. Costco isn't just paying more per worker. It's getting more than double the output per worker from a stable, experienced, low-turnover team that already knows exactly what it's doing. So follow the entire chain all the way through, because now you can finally see the whole machine at once, instead of one piece at a time. Costco caps its own margin at 12% instead of the industry's 25%, using the membership fee as the subsidy that makes that survivable. The lower prices that decision creates drive enormous volume, exactly the way Craig Jelinek described. That volume runs through a deliberately tiny catalog of only 4,000 items, which hands Costco enormous negotiating leverage over every single supplier fighting to be one of the one or two brands allowed on the shelf. The speed at which that small, high-volume catalog moves creates a 30-day inventory cycle against 40-day supplier payment terms, generating a continuous float of free cash extracted directly from the supply chain. And that cash, instead of being extracted as extra profit or handed to shareholders as a buyback, gets reinvested into paying the workforce roughly a third more than the industry standard, which produces a workforce that stays for years instead of months, becomes twice as productive as the industry average, and makes the entire operation run smoothly enough that the low prices at the front of the store remain sustainable. Every piece of this feeds every other piece. It's not 8 separate smart decisions, it's one single, self-reinforcing loop. And the membership fee sitting at the very start of it isn't the profit at the end of the chain, it's the fuel that makes the whole engine possible to run in the first place. This is why the popular explanation is so misleading, even though it isn't malicious. It takes the one number that's easiest to understand, a $65 card fee, and it turns that into the entire story, because a card fee is simple and a self-reinforcing operational flywheel spanning margins, inventory velocity, supplier leverage, and labor economics is not something you can explain in a 15-second clip. But the accurate version is so much more impressive than the myth. A business that simply pockets a membership fee and calls it a day is a fairly ordinary business model. Plenty of gyms and streaming services do exactly that. A business that uses a membership fee as leverage to voluntarily cap its own margins and then builds an entire operational engine on top of that decision that turns suppliers into financiers and turnover into a competitive weapon. That is one of the most sophisticated retail models ever built, and almost nobody explaining it to you actually understands that's what they're looking at. And here's the number that should really make this land. Costco's total revenue now sits at over $275 billion a year. Target, one of its most direct competitors in the broader retail space, does around $105 billion. Costco isn't just bigger, it's operating at more than double the scale, while charging some of the lowest prices in American retail, while paying some of the highest wages in American retail, while running one of the leanest product catalogs in American retail. Conventional retail logic says you can pick maybe two of those three things. Low prices and high wages usually means thin, fragile margins. High wages and a huge catalog usually means bloated costs. Costco has found a way to run all three simultaneously, and the membership fee is not the reason why. It's simply the small, steady, unglamorous piece of income that gives the company the confidence to keep the entire flywheel spinning, year after year, without ever needing to reach for a bigger slice of margin the way every other retailer eventually does. So the next time someone tells you Costco makes all its money from membership fees, you'll know the honest answer, and it's a better story than the one they're telling you. The fee isn't the profit. The fee is the permission. It's what lets Costco walk into a negotiation with a supplier and mean it when it says no. It's what lets a company turn its own inventory before its own bills come due, quietly using its suppliers' patience as free financing. It's what lets a retailer pay its workers more than almost anyone else in the industry and come out ahead anyway, because the people who stay for years are worth more than the money saved by paying people who leave in months. None of that fits in a 15-second clip, and none of it depends on a rotisserie chicken being sold at a loss. It depends on a company that looked at the entire logic of modern retail, decided to voluntarily give up the one number every other retailer chases, margin, and built, on top of that single sacrifice, one of the most durable and quietly ruthless machines in the history of American business.